I'm Arian and Beverly, and this is Death the Podcast. Death is the destruction or permanent end of something. At Death the Podcast, we are looking closely at what happens when something ends. We listen, learn about, and discuss the stories that surround the subject of death. These stories bring up much more than feelings of fear and sadness. They offer opportunities for connection, for hope, and sometimes even for humor. Ultimately, if we are open to exploring death, we create greater potential to experience life. Hi, I'm Arian and Beverly. I'm a clinical psychologist here in New Orleans. I have the pleasure of interviewing Beverly Morris. Beverly, I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Before getting into why I asked you, I want to give people a little background about you. You are an incredible artist. Besides all your private commissions, your work has also been commissioned by Saks Fifth Avenue. You practice yoga, and you're an amazing yoga instructor. You're somebody who truly personifies the importance of the mind-body connection. Besides all that, you have a degree in poli-sci from Tulane and worked for 15 years as a copywriter and creative director for the Times-Picayune. I'm struck in saying all this, Beverly, how well-rounded you are, both inside and out. And you're also a cancer survivor and someone who has lost people close to you to cancer. You were originally diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor in 1987, and since that time have had a total of 3 brain surgeries, the most recent in 2008. All told, you have received 4.5 years of chemotherapy and a lifetime dosage of radiation. To say the very obvious, it seems that you are someone who has plenty of personal experience with the subject matter of death. So I guess I'd like to start by asking you to tell me a bit about the first time you recall experiencing real fear that you might die.
Well, when I was first diagnosed, I really wasn't in a lot of fear. And my doctor, Dr. Yassergill, was, I don't know, I kind of felt like it was they were removing some very benign thing from my brain, so I didn't experience a lot of fear of death. And it wasn't until the second surgery, which was about a year later, that I was very, very scared. And there were 2 people in the brain cancer group who I would allow my mother to give me the phone so I could speak to them. And that was really the first time that I had a lot of fear about what was happening, because I was much more aware of what the dangers were. And I remember memorizing my Sprint phone number, which was this very long, there was like some kind of a passcode and then the phone number, and then there was this thing, and I thought, okay, if I can memorize that and say that after surgery, then I'm good to go. Which I was able to do after I woke up. So.
Do you still remember the phone number?
No, I don't. I do remember my neurosurgeon's phone number in Arkansas.
That's amazing. I have trouble remembering my phone number these days. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so when you said that there were 2 people that you would talk to from the group, it was a support group.
Yes, it was a support group for brain tumor survivors. And those 2 people were Vaughn and Nora. And they just had really profound survivor stories. Both of them have passed away. And, you know, I don't know, what I learned from them really was kind of some survival skills, and in particular, Vaughn, I think. So I don't know where I'm going with this.
That's okay. Well, what kinds of things did you learn from Vaughn?
Well, basically that it was okay to fire a doctor. That was really important for me, because I did have a doctor who didn't believe that I was having seizures, and that it was that I was being, I don't know, hysterical, or that I was making it up in my mind, or that it was stress or something. And this same doctor had told Vaughn the same thing when he was found like climbing on these bushes outside of his house. He didn't know where he was, and that same doctor had also told Vaughn that it was all in his head, basically, which in fact it was, because he had a brain tumor, and so did I. So,
Well, and so that's got to be so disorienting. I mean, literally, but also you're saying you're having this experience, and then you're hearing from your doctor. No.
yes, yeah. It was pretty terrifying, and it was very. Really scared me because I started questioning myself, like, wait a minute, maybe, I don't know, maybe I am. Am I going crazy? Am I overreacting here? And maybe these aren't seizures, maybe I'm having panic attacks, which that was what he actually thought I was having, panic attacks. And then I was at work, and I had gone back to work, and I had a seizure at work, and they took me to the hospital, and that's when they were able to see more of the tumor. And so it kind of, in a strange way, gave me comfort to know that I wasn't imagining these things, and that it was not a panic attack, but that there was still tumor there that was causing me to have these seizures.
So
the permission to fire doctor was like, okay, I'm not going back to this guy unless I want a doctor around who believes me,
right.
who knows that I'm telling the truth, and who is going to really listen to me and respond to me.
Well, yeah, that seems key, the listening to you, and also that, like, being given that information from Vaughn to listen to yourself, like that you had something to say that wasn't being attended to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what other survival skills do you feel like you learned?
Well, I think having some kind of a community is really important. It was for me. It was, the original group of people who were in that brain tumor group have pretty much all passed away. Vaughn died in 2008. And so I'm one of the few people who is still, alive from that original group.
I'm wondering what it must feel like to outlive people that you love, who you saw struggling with somewhat similar things. And
well, it's a bit I know that I have survivor's guilt. I also feel really grateful to the people who passed before me, and it is never easy, but I was able to witness and kind of bear witness to these people and their struggles, and with understanding, being able to be present with them was really incredible, because there were some people who were very stoic about their death. There were some people who, there was one woman who I absolutely adored, and she spent a hell of a lot of money and did some really good shopping. That's the superficial part of it, but it was basically, she was like, okay, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to do for the next year, and I'm going to enjoy the hell out of myself. And she did. Her approach is going to be live full out, and she did that. And there was another cancer survivor who I saw who was really very focused on her hair. And she had beautiful hair, but she was obsessed with her hair. And I remember her coming to the group, and it's like, hey, guess what? You know what? It's not really about the hair. It's not about the hair. It's about your life right now. So let that go. And I understand that. I after having the radiation, I have this kind of baldish area that I remember when my hair was coming out, and it's such a part of being feminine is, your hair.
Mm-hmm.
And but I could really see her obsession with her hair, which it really did turn into this obsession, was maybe a way of like not addressing the fact that she was really sick and dying.
Were you given a certain prognosis in terms of?
Yes. The doctor, well, first told me that it was inoperable, and then he said that, I mean, I told him at a certain point, I would like to have children. He said, well, I wouldn't recommend that. I think you're going to be dead before the kid is a teenager. And so, and he was really that coarse in the way that he said it. But the interesting thing was that he was the doctor who would always give me the absolute worst prognosis. And then my neurosurgeon was the man who would give me the absolute best prognosis. Like after the surgery, he's like, oh, you'll be back to work in a few days. So between the two of them, I could somehow find a reality of what was actually going to happen, so. And he said, it depends on the whether or not this is a low-grade tumor or a high-grade tumor. And if it's a low-grade, it could be years and years before anything happens. He gave me a 5-year cutoff. He said at 5 years, if you have not had a recurrence, then it will remain a low-grade tumor. We'll know that it's a low-grade tumor. If it gets more aggressive, we'll know that it has become a higher-grade tumor. So it was right at the 5-year mark that I had a recurrence. And there was always a very small part of the tumor that they couldn't take out without, well, they did enough damage, but they couldn't have taken it all out without really hurting me. So
the fact that they had to leave a certain part there because you don't mess with that part, whatever that part is that better or worse for prognosis wise? I guess you.
I don't know, but the my neurosurgeon had told me that there was no more tumor in there, and there were a lot of other doctors who were found that to be a very controversial statement because they didn't feel like any tumor can be fully removed through surgery. So I had a suspicion that maybe all of the tumor hadn't been taken out.
How do you feel like living with that kind of uncertainty has changed the way you do live?
Well, I know that initially I remember being so incredibly grateful just to be alive. I remember one day I was outside. Well, the other thing as far as the surgery is that I had a really bad reaction to the anesthesia. Mm-hmm. And so I was incredibly nauseous, and it was just the worst feeling. And back then, they didn't have the anti-nausea drugs that they have today. And my mother stayed up all night putting cold, wet compresses on my neck, my throat, and my wrists and everything to help with the nausea. And that was like the only thing that helped with that. And what am I trying to?
Well, we were talking about the kind of the uncertainty of prognosis, and so how does that change the way that you end up living?
Oh, okay. So when I got out of that surgery, where my mother had been, basically nursing me all night, I remember eventually coming home and just being so grateful to be alive. I remember looking around. Now, this could have been one of the anticonvulsants I was on too, but I remember looking around and going, oh my God, am I in heaven? Why the colors are so beautiful, and it's such a beautiful day, and the wind feels incredible, and I'm just raking, and it's beautiful, and life is good, and, and so there is that gratitude, because after being very sick, and I think everyone experiences that after being very sick, to be well again feels incredible, and to do normal things feels incredible. To go to the grocery store, which I hadn't been able to do, was an incredible thing. So that is a hard feeling to sustain, but it's something that I know is incredibly important that I need to remember. So it's like a constant remembering thing of going back to, yeah, this is a really precious thing, that I'm alive, that I'm healthy, that I can talk, that I can walk, that I can speak. So that kind of gratitude for living, something also that I saw in other of the cancer survivors. And I remember Nora, who I spoke about earlier, saying, today is a beautiful day. Today is a beautiful day to be alive. And she just said that over and over again. And, I think also a lot about being in the present. Patrick, who was another brain cancer survivor who also passed away, he spoke about swimming. That was one of the ways that he would keep his health up. And he would talk about being in the water and listening to the sound of his own breath and the sound of the water as he did the crawl, and how beautiful it was just to be there and present. And so those are things that I take with me. Those are all lessons from the people that were in that group, who, and Patrick also passed away, but
so that kind of I guess richness that you're talking about of being able to see the world and from that kind of appreciative place. I mean, I guess I sort of appreciate what you said about that that is awesome, but that also not being sustainable. And I guess I'm wondering, like, what do you do on those days where you're just like, why did this happen to me?
You know what? That's a good question, because I remember asking myself that, and then my conclusion was, well, why not me? Maybe I was given this brain cancer to learn some things that I really need to learn to be able to help other people with brain cancer. So I really did take that position of, it could have happened to anyone, and I never got into that place of, why me? It was really more like, okay, why not me? And I was able to help a lot of people when they first got diagnosed, and also as they went through their time surviving, and as they went through their time not surviving. So, and I think I have some kind of a tolerance, or, I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of questioning myself. What is the role of this brain cancer in my life? Like, why? What is it trying to say to me? What benefit do I get from having this? Which, I don't mean to make it sound like I'm responsible for it, but that I could use the time to really ask myself those questions.
Well, that sounds incredibly wise. Also, probably, I would imagine, well, it speaks to why people would want you around, I think, when probably they were in the most amount of pain. That's very calming. But I guess to follow up on what you were asking yourself about, like, what is this here to teach me? What have you come up with?
Well, one thing that I know is that I would not give up this experience. I wouldn't wish it on another person, but I also wouldn't give up this experience of really learning to love these people in this group, learning how to be present. Some of the lessons that I learned, those life lessons that are so invaluable that other people will never have the opportunity of learning because they have never been around someone who is dying or who has some kind of a fatal illness. And I did a lot of reading. One was Bernie Siegel, Love, Medicine, and Miracles, and Carl Simonton's Getting Well Again was another one. And sorry, I can't remember where I'm going with this, but they were very helpful for me and comforting. And yeah, lost my train of thought.
Well, no, that's all right. It sounds like you were open to being comforted. I mean, those are great books. They're incredible.
Yes.
They're incredible books, for sure. But it also takes a reader to be open to the kind of information and wisdom those books have to impart. And you sound like you're that person.
Well, yeah, one of the things I think in Getting Well Again, or it might have been Cancer as a Turning Point, one of them was ask your disease, why are you here? What is it that you're trying to teach me? And one of the things that I came up with was that the diagnosis allowed me to say no, which, before I had been diagnosed, I mean, I was all out from the time that I woke up in the morning till the time I went to sleep, and I was working really hard, very stressed, but I just didn't slow down at all. And so I would continue to say yes to people, to doing things, to getting things done. And I had to really learn how to slow down, to appreciate my life, how to say no with some kind of grace and dignity to people, so that I didn't overwhelm myself. And I would have seizures if I were too stressed out or if I didn't get enough sleep. And so
those seizures have kind of been there as like a warning signal.
Yeah, it means I need more sleep, or I need to reduce my stress somehow. And my friend Teresa, who is a really close friend, and we worked together at the paper, she's the one who called my mother, and she just said, Gail, your daughter is having really bad seizures. She's having grand mals, and she needs some help. She needs, I think you should come down here and be with her. So my mother was there for a grand mal that for some reason, after I had the seizures, I wanted to take a bath. My mother was like, no, I'm not going to let you take a bath. I was like, I just want to get in the bathtub. That's all I want to do, is I want to get in the bathtub. And then the EMS people were there, and I'm like, I want to get in the bathtub. It's this like post-ictal state after a grand mal where everything is totally confusing and you can get pretty aggressive. So at any rate, she finally, witnessed that, and she saw what was going on as far as the seizures, and it had been a really, really rough year. I mean, there were a couple of times where I don't even know how the hell I was able to make a phone call. There was one time my neighbor, I called over there, and the neighbor came into my house.
You called after having a seizure?
It must have been like right as I was going into it.
Oh
and then his wife came over, and I didn't recognize her, and I was like, get out of my room. Who are you? I don't know who you are. Get out of here. And, so there were a number of ambulance rides to the hospital, and most of them were kind of like that, where I would go into a seizure, not know where the hell I was, and then be in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, having bitten my tongue, or, all that kind of stuff.
So was it harder on you to have your mom bear witness to this going on, or being alone? And it's amazing that you made a phone call.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Honestly, I did most of this kind of on my own. Like, she wanted me to give up my studio. She wanted me to stop doing some other things, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And it really was just my hard-headedness that, kept me going. And I remember with my father, who wanted me to do all of these super duper alternative treatments, finally telling him, look, I don't want to argue over this, but I've been working at this a long time, and I'm the one that found the nutritionist who works with brain cancer patients. You didn't do that, I did that. So, quit questioning my method of healing here. And if I choose to do a conventional treatment, that's on me, and I will do what I think is going to save me. And the cayenne pepper is not going to stop my seizures, other than to really make my mouth burn. And so it was an interesting process, but a lot of it was done by myself, and a lot of it I would go, to my doctor, Dr. Gertler, who's local here, and who, saved my ass many times and saved my life, and, as did Dr. Yassergill. And so
I'm amazed at your ability to, at least listening, think, well, first of all, listen to yourself. I mean, most people who don't have a brain tumor struggle to listen to that inner voice that you kind of keep coming back to in all of this. I mean, is that something has that always been you?
I don't think so. I mean, I'd like to say so. I think I'm still working on it, and I think I'm a human being, and, the struggle is to, continue to learn how to love myself, and how to be accepting, and how to continue to live my life without regret and without resentment and anger. And, that's the way to live. I mean, the other way is a way of just torturing. And I would see people in the group who I could kind of tell, like, who was going to survive and who was not going to survive. And you know what, Arian, I have no idea. I may not survive. I don't know. Next month I could get a scan back that says, no, there's been a recurrence or something. So
How often is that on your radar, that thought?
Well, every time I go, if I start having little seizures, which I haven't had a grand mal in many years, but when I start having lots of these little seizures, then, it becomes an issue. I'll call Dr. Gertler, and she will always set up an MRI very quickly. And she doesn't wait over the weekend before she tells me, okay, everything's fine. And the times that it hasn't been, like, I have a real network of doctors. So if there were any kind of changes, I was very proactive in my recovery in reading MRI reports, getting copies of things, getting a 3-ring binder, having all my lab work, having all my MRI reports, having all my the CDs of the brain, so that I could, on my own, FedEx to different doctors and get opinions if there were any questions about what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way that I would want to approach my own death would be somehow having a graceful death without, having to cling to the idea of my hair's got to be there or something else, just having some dignity. And, I could outlive a lot of people. I could also, get that diagnosis that there's been a recurrence. And I know that if I do have a recurrence, it is not going to be pretty. It's going to be the, grade 3 or 4, grade 4. Because the last time I had the surgery, it was had been graded up to a grade 3. So so that I have some fear around.
So what's most healing for you? What brings you the most peace?
Probably being outside, like the weather that is outside right now is my favorite kind of weather, where it's still warm and the wind is, that brings me an incredible amount of peace. And my artwork, being in my studio, gives me that opportunity to not have to be anything other than a creative person making a piece of artwork. And I get to get very focused when I'm at my studio and I'm working on a piece. So it can also be very frustrating too, because ceramics in general, you need to have a certain level of patience with it. So, yeah, working in the studio, being with my animals, my, hanging out with friends, and
You seem like you have a very good sense of humor.
yeah, that helps. Definitely helps. Yeah. And that was pretty much present with everybody in the group, or maybe not. Maybe it was just me. I'm not really sure. But I always found things to laugh about that we would all end up laughing. People would think, "Oh my God!" I'd ask, whatever guy that I was dating, "You want to come to the brain tumor survivor group?" And they'd be like, "No, not really."
That's such an awesome pickup line. I mean, how many guys get to hear that?
and then I'd get there and we would all end up just laughing because of the ridiculous things that would end up happening as a result of, having a brain tumor. And it was a very specific set of problems.
Well, you exude so much life. All I can say sitting here across from you is that I have so much gratitude for your willingness to do this, and the presence that you have and the energy you give off is wonderful.
Thank you, dear.
It is so true. Thank you, Beverly, so much.
You are so welcome. Anytime you need to talk about brain cancer, just give me a
dial you
call.
up.
1-800-BRAIN. Look, I just have to like this. My friend Will called me, and he was like, this was right when I was diagnosing. He was like, "Hey, Beverly, I know you have a lot on your I know you have a lot on your mind going on." So, and he was trying to say, "I know you have a lot on your mind."
Right. Well, and the thing is that, and this is the same with you. I know that you felt like a couple of times, even here when we were talking, that you lost your train of thought. There's such a realness and authenticity to you that's just there, that you don't have to fight for. It's so nice.
Oh,
so
well,
nice.
that's good, because I find it very distracting and not a good experience. But thank you for saying that.
You're welcome. The word death evokes all sorts of personal feelings, images, and stories. These stories are compelling, and sharing them connects us more fully to life. I'm Arian Elfont, and you've been listening to Death, the podcast. Join us for our next episode in this series. This show is produced and engineered by Eric Merle. Our theme music, It Happened, is written by David Milling and is performed by David Milling and Charles Milling. To hear more of David's music, you can go to his website, davidmilling.com. If you're listening to this on iTunes or Stitcher or some other podcast app, if you could take a moment to rate and review us, that helps other people find us. You can find Death the Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. On all of them, we're called Death the Podcast. Death the Podcast is a production of INO Broadcasting.
You know Labor Day signals the unofficial end of summer, but not the end of your outdoor projects. Lowe's helps you do it right and helps you save with Labor Day deals throughout the store. Shop now and get 2 bags of Stay Green potting mix for $12. And keep your lawn looking neat and trim with a Craftsman 2-cycle 17-inch gas string trimmer, now $20 off at just $119. Whatever's still on your to-do list this Labor Day, do it right for less. Start with Lowe's. Offers valid through 8/28. Soil offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii, U.S. only.